Okay, yesterday we talked about the workforce, we talked about African Americans, Hispanics, various ethnic and racial minorities being instrumental to the war effort in World War II, and the role that women played, which was revolutionary. Not only did women work in factories, Rosie the Riveter, and in more traditional roles, they were integral part of all the branches of the armed forces, not as combat soldiers, but as officers who did much of the administrative work of the various branches. The war couldn't have been won without those women doing that work, because it freed up the men, the only people allowed to fight at the time, many more men, to be on the front. So it was not an inconsiderable thing, it was vital to the war effort. But now you're just Ma and Pa citizen, and you're living at home, and what's life like for you during the war? Again, there are many agencies, and although we need to be aware of them, we can kind of forget them, okay? We don't really want to try to memorize who these people are or what they're trying to regulate, other than to say that everything was, in fact, regulated, because there's a huge war going on in two hemispheres that we have to manage at the time people are living their lives at home. It's fair to say that everyone's life was disrupted, but it's also fair to say that compared to England or France or Japan or China or virtually any place where the war was actually happening, home life was disrupted much less in the United States than it was in some of those other places. Well, aside from producing things, the people at home had to save and conserve things. And this kind of says it. Rationing was something that was done across the board. And it's pretty clear. Do with less, so they'll have more. Harry's having his morning coffee, and maybe he needs the coffee more than you do. I will pay no more than top legal prices. I will not, in other words, destroy the rationing system by bidding the prices up. And I will not buy anything without giving up my ration card, which would allow me to go and buy multiple steaks if people would sell it to me without having to give up a ration card or stamp. And here you can see Ma is turning down the thermostat for her oil furnace, and here is a GI rolling out a 55-gallon drum of petroleum. So it's obvious. It's not rocket science to see what's going on. But to get everyone to buy in and to enforce that without having to literally enforce it is one of the things that was the great thing about World War II. People pitched in every way. This became a catchphrase. Is this trip really necessary? You have to drive 35 miles and under because you don't want to wear out the tires. Don't have that much rubber. We need them for the war effort. We don't want to use gas. We need it for the war effort. The other thing that people did was contribute stuff, and I do mean stuff in quotes, to the war effort. For example, fat drives. What's a fat drive? Well, everybody was a fried up in lard, fried up in grease, fried up in oil kind of society. And when you fried your bacon and you poured your bacon out, please pour it in a can and take it down to somebody, in this case it's Browner's store, where they have a big vat of it, and you pour it in once a week, and they collect all the fat from the community and they haul it off, and eventually they can use it to process glycerin to make bombs and munitions, and also make it into soap. And they make the point so that everybody understood what they were doing. Yes, you can pour this fat from your frying pan right down and shoot it off and make Hitler pay. Scrap drives. We need all the metal we can come across. How many farmers had an old plow out behind the barn? How many old rusted out drums in the back of somebody's garage. Here's somebody's even got a metal casket that says "Ready for Hitler" on it, that they're going to take and render down into some usable product. More of the same. Kids would get involved. Households would get involved. Farmers would get involved. Here's a bunch of, I said, the plow out behind the barn. Here's a bunch of old rusted farm implements put into the hopper that come out being pieces, parts of war material. This is an International Harvester ad. More. The junk on your farm can be a torpedo to destroy Japan and Germany. Deposit your scrap here. The other thing, we talked about victory gardens, so we get something in your own backyard, but more than that, more than just a victory garden, was the effort to make it almost quasi-military. Of course, everybody had a victory garden, including Donald. So the idea was everyone would do it. Kids would do it. They created something called the Women's Land Army. It was sort of an agricultural, rural version of Rosie the Riveter. These are women who are not exactly just having a big victory garden in their backyard, but are growing crops, all kinds of crops, including staple crops, for the market, not the sales market, but for the government market to take and process into, say, bread for the troops and things of that sort. All kinds. Pitch in and help, the Women's Land Army, it was a real thing. It was a big thing. Tends to be not as publicized because it's probably not as glamorous as women working in the factory. How was it financed? One of the genius things of World War II, taken and expanded upon what was done in World War I, was to sell bonds. Not to tax more, but to sell bonds. People would take their savings and put it in the government. The government would spend the money, and over 10 years, it might mature. So many high school classrooms like ours with 15, 16-year-old kids, not old enough to join, not ready to join in either the service or as Rosie the Riveter, but could bring in nickels and dimes, and our class would buy an $18.75 e-bond. And in 10 years at the class reunion, you could distribute $25 to that same group of now adults. It wasn't a lot of money. We've talked about money was worth more in purchasing power, but it wasn't about the money, it was about supporting the war effort. And thousands of these things were sold to church groups, PTAs, kids, Cub Scouts, all kinds of people that would go out and raise money in a nickel dime kind of a way, put their money together and spend $18.75 to support the war effort. You buy them, we'll fly them is obvious. Again, it's pretty obvious how this works. Everybody sold bonds. You can see Bugs and Porky. And one of the things, as a history kind of person, it is odd to me that Elmer became bigger and portlier during World War II than he was both before that time and after that time. A little wascally Elmer Fudd is a little bit, he still was wascally because he had that same voice, but he was a different looking kind of a guy. Your superheroes, your Pinocchios, your Bugs Bunny, like I already mentioned, all of them sold war bonds. It was a thing that every celebrity, toon, or real person did in the war. Even the big guy got involved in selling war bonds. He was on our side. Thank goodness, right? All right, that's a look at daily life. Tomorrow we'll take about a 5-minute look at Japanese internment.